Welcome back to Unaesthetically Speaking. I'm your host, Juliana Mary. Unaesthetically Speaking is a podcast all about how to build and sustain a beautiful brand. Today we're chatting with Katie Dean of Katie Dean Jewelry. Katie, I am so excited that you are here talking with us today. And I would love if you could introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your beautiful business.
Thank you so much for having me. And yes, I would love to tell you about my jewelry line, Katie Dean Jewelry. I started over 10 years ago. I was actually assistant styling in Hollywood. So we were dressing celebrities for red carpet looks and commercials and then billboards, etc. And I just got to the end of the day and I was like, man, I feel like I need something else creatively to fulfill me and like the ideas that I have. So I started making jewelry at night, actually in a closet, like Harry Potter style. And I was wearing it out and about. People were saying, wow, I love this. Like, where'd you get it? And I just said, I've been making it. And they asked if they could buy it. So I literally sold my first pieces off of me. And I took that as a sign, like, okay, I think I have something here. And that's just like the genesis of how I started.
Oh my gosh, I love that story because not only were you doing, you had this like super cool career like happening, but I love the fact that people would just like literally buy your jewelry off of your body. Like that's
Yeah,
so funny.
totally. I was kind of shocked myself. I was like, okay, yeah, for sure.
And so, okay, so how many times did that happen before you were like, all right, I've got a business here. Like I'm gonna take this somewhere more seriously.
Yeah, good question. So I had two friends that initially wanted to meet up and they wanted to buy the pieces that they saw me wearing. And
Mm-hmm.
then actually my boss, who I was helping, like she was the main stylist that I was working under. She would actually approach me and she, I think, had a client that didn't have a piece of jewelry that fit the look for her red carpet look. And she asked me, can you make something for her look? And I said, yeah, for sure.
Oh
So
my
I
gosh.
think after I had that reach, like someone else asking me to do something for them in jewelry, I thought
Yeah.
I really should pursue this and create a full collection at this point. And honestly, in the beginning, a lot of my success came from just saying yes. Like somebody wanted to buy something, I said, yeah, sure. They wanted a custom piece, I said, sure, I can do it. Like I just was willing to try things and make it go right.
Yeah.
And that definitely helped to start the business.
I think saying yes is so huge. And it's funny you say that because I was kind of debating whether or not to share this. When we first met, so it was, oh my gosh, I was pregnant with my first daughter. So it had to be 2015, I think. Probably
Yeah,
2015.
that sounds right.
Yeah, like spring of 2015. And or summer. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So 2015 sometime and we met and we were doing like a pop-up shop together. So you had your jewelry and then I was selling stationery. And after that, which was like totally random for me. I had never done anything like that. So I just, to your point, said yes. And then I met you, and then you asked me if I could do the illustrations for your wedding invitations. And that was one of those situations where no one had ever hired me to do custom illustrations for wedding invitations. And I was just like, yes, like, yes, let's go. And so it was so exciting because that was really one of my first, working with you was like really one of my first like business, like deals, like my first. So saying yes to like unique and new things, how many times has that happened, do you think, in your business? Do you think that's just sort of like
Oh,
a
wow.
reoccurring theme for you where you're just like, yeah, let's go?
Definitely. Like, I'm trying to think of various other things that occurred. I would say like you said with events, I had people saying like, "Oh, do you do pop-up shops? Do you do little events?" And I hadn't done
Yeah.
any of that. And so I would say, "Yeah, sure, let's do." Or I would be honest sometimes and say, "I haven't done this, but I'd like to, so I'm willing to
Yeah.
give it a shot." Probably the other huge thing that I said yes to in the beginning was wholesale. Like the
Mhm.
first time that I got approached about doing wholesale, I had no idea what that meant. I had to look it up on Google, like, what does it mean to wholesale your product? And then
Yeah.
I found out, oh yeah, it's like you give them the product at a huge discount so they can resell it. And I did that order, I want to say for like 1,500 pieces. So it was huge.
Wow.
Like at
Yeah.
first it was going to be 500 or 100 pieces. And then they were like, actually 500. And then they were like, could you do like 1,500? And it might have ended up being 2,000 pieces. But I just said yes. And if I had said, no, I don't do wholesale yet, I don't know what it is, then I wouldn't have had that huge order, you know?
Yeah.
And a lot of in the beginning, a lot of my success or like at least marketing success came from basically making pieces for our photo shoots that
Oh,
with the stylist that I was working for. So
yeah.
I wouldn't have had the publicity that I got in the beginning stages of being on like Kendall Jenner, Priyanka Chopra, Shay Mitchell from Pretty Little Liars. Like I was on all these celebrities, but a lot of that had to do with like there was a need that wasn't being met. Like they didn't have the piece available that would fit the look. And I was
Yeah.
just like, okay, I'll volunteer to make the piece that you need. Or so
Oh
I
my gosh.
think a lot of that yes factor of just being willing to try new things is huge when you start a new business. I mean, you don't want to get taken advantage of, but you have to
Yeah.
learn a lot in the beginning of your business. And that comes from just trying things. And sometimes they don't work, which is fine. You know, like I did a lot of pop up events at places that really it didn't fit for my customer or whoever my customer was. It wasn't the right fit, but at least I tried it and then I knew. So it's always a learning experience, you know.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Absolutely. So, I mean, that's crazy to me that it, that from such an early point in your business, you had your jewelry on celebrities. Like that's amazing. And
Yeah.
what was kind of that ride for you? Because did your business just like immediately just take off because of that kind of exposure? Were there any ups and downs? What walk me through kind of the evolution of Katie Dean Jewelry at the
Yeah.
beginning through, I mean, today, because you've been in business for over a decade, right?
Over yeah, over 10 years. Officially became a business in 2012, but then
Okay.
when you and I met, that's when I officially went out on my own. Like I didn't have another job to support any sort of income.
Yeah.
So, it's sometimes I think of like that is when I really started because that was when the pressure was really on.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been over 10 years, which was awesome. And that's a really good question because I actually did have a lot of success in the beginning, but it was very, very dependent upon the publicity. So
Mm.
I would have these celebrities wearing it. And then I would get the publicity from that. And there would be a lot of instant sales. So a lot of people that were like, oh my gosh, this is cool right now. I'm going to buy it. And
Yeah.
then when I decided that I couldn't keep up with both styling and doing the jewelry line, and I had to pick one or the other. And then I decided I'm going to go full time into jewelry. I lost that immediate connection that I had to celebrity
No.
relations, you know, and
Yeah.
I wasn't able to pay for a PR house on my own because those are thousands and thousands of dollars a month. So without me being there on the ground with them, I wasn't able to do that sort of thing where it's like, oh, you need this piece of jewelry, I'll make it really quick. I didn't have
Yeah.
that access anymore.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, that's where like, the wholesale deal that I had in the very, very beginning for like 2,000 pieces, that felt like an overnight success for me
Yeah.
because I got that because Kendall Jenner and Kylie Jenner were wearing my pieces on social media,
Ugh.
and they had just like fanatic fans, people that were just like be obsessed with everything that they were wearing. So
Yeah.
then that got out to a bunch of blogs and then got onto this one website where a bunch of people wanted to buy a particular piece that I had. And when I left the styling world, coming around back around to that, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to have that type of publicity anymore. So
Right.
then I had to totally rethink my business because for those first 3 years, I wasn't doing a lot of events. And then I was like, wow, if I don't have the eyeballs online that I need to have on my stuff, I'm going to have to go out and meet people like in person. So at that point, I started doing events. And then I had to learn, like, okay, I tried so many events, like almost every weekend I was at a new event, and some of them were terrible. Like, you know what I mean? Like some were bombs. I
Yeah.
went there and I'm like, whoa, this is like a flea market that's like antiques. You know what I mean? So it wasn't.
Like not,
And then other,
not the
yeah,
target.
yeah. And then other ones, it was like, wow, this is an incredible, like my customers, this is my customer, so I had to try a lot of things before I really found out, like, these are the great events that I want to do every year. And this is like, Instagram was just starting. So like I had to evolve my voice on that. And then we tried some paid marketing. So it even if a company, even if you do as a brand have like a lot of success up front, if you change the operating basis, like I was no longer styling, you're going to have to then refigure that out. So it's like
Yeah.
it's a constant evolution, I would say. And now actually during the pandemic, which was another huge pivot for me, because at that point I was like, oh, I'll hire people to do events. I was really going to expand into the event
Yeah.
world. And I was like, okay, now I can't, no one's doing events. And I actually applied for a artisan, basically marketplace that Madewell has on their website, where they
Oh, yeah.
represent certain artists. They like endorse you and they say like, hey, we're selling this person's stuff, they're awesome. I got that partnership, and that was a whole nother big side of my business that I had no idea I could even have. So, and I don't do as many events now because I'm a mom and I don't have the time to do them. So it's like, it's been a constant evolution, that's for sure.
Do you have a team working with you now, or is it just you?
So I have people that I could hire on to do events with me. But basically all the people that I work with are contractors. So they are specialized. They like have their own business in regards to whatever service they're providing. So I
Okay.
have a caster, a plate person, stone setter, and then I do all the assembly work for the pieces still in-house. But then I have a fulfillment center as well. And then some of the people that work at the fulfillment center are open to doing events, but I haven't actually hired them to do any yet. But I was like, okay, if I need that, would you be willing to? And they were like, yeah, that's a service we could also offer. So right now I only work with contractor basis service providers.
Amazing. And all of what makes your line, I think, really unique is that everything's made in America. So you're working with all people who are in the United States, correct? All artisans here.
That's right. Yeah, that's a huge point for me because, for example, like my grandpa, he worked at General Motors, which was, there was a huge factory in Michigan. That's where I'm from. And he literally, that was his entire career. Like he started there and he retired from there. And
Yeah.
I think it's a beautiful thing having a made in America, product, like it's also pretty unique. I don't think there's like that many. I think there's actually a renaissance happening in regards to like people are trying to have products made in America now. Like they're putting attention on that and like something that we want to prioritize as a
Yeah.
community. But that's something for me that is just so important. Like I want to create, work for other people and have my money that I make from American citizens go back into American hands. So that's something that I really take pride in. It definitely um raises the cost of my
I was
product
going
a
to
lot,
ask.
and that's why, yeah, like it's pretty significant, that's for sure. But I just feel like it's an integrity point for me, and I I'm just like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. But I try to create that story within all my social media posts and emails and
Mhm.
marketing materials that like, hey, you are buying something that's going back into the American economy. So like, yeah, it might be $10 more or $20 more than another brand, but like we're making it here. So I try to make that very clear to the customer that they're also paying for something that they're reinvesting in their country, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Was it ever a temptation to like ship it out because it would be less expensive? Was that ever a thing you were like, ooh, if I just did that? Or were you always
Definitely.
just like, no?
Oh yeah, I've looked into it, like how much would I really save and like how would that change my production basis? But the other nice thing, because when you are going to basically export from another country, typically you have to do huge volume to make it worth
Oh,
it.
yeah.
And that was another thing that I appreciate about making in America. I can make smaller batches, so I'm not, it's actually a bit more economical long term in a way because I'm not having to upfront pay for 1,000 pieces or 2,000 pieces. I can do batches of 100. And
Yeah.
then it's like, I find that, I mean, I feel more secure doing that also because I can really, really look at the quality of it and make sure that it's like quality control. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Yeah.
we're it's like that's another thing you have to deal with as a huge, I guess, a really, really big business. If you're going to export from another country like China, you could take a chance at like getting the wrong product. If they make a
Mm.
mistake and then it's replicated on 10,000 pieces. So I think there's like risks on both sides,
Yeah.
Um, but for me, this is like manageable, especially as a small business, to do it within America and at a smaller scale.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I want to backtrack a little bit to you mentioned so in 2015 you made that decision to leave your full-time job to do your business full-time. What Okay, I'm always just interested to know like from like an entrepreneurial standpoint, how did you approach that decision? Because there's so much advice on the internet about making sure you have, 6 months of living expenses saved up, making sure you're doing all these things, or, how you approach taking that leap into entrepreneurship. How did you do it?
Mhm. I mean, I did have money in the bank so that, I could pay rent for a few months.
Okay.
I don't remember exactly the numbers that I had. Like, oh, did I have 6 months of, rent saved up? I don't think so. Um, but I will say that the biggest thing for me was like, if I always hold on to something else, like that
Mhm.
other job,
Yeah.
I'll never actually have the nerve to take a big leap of faith. And also it was like very, very hard for me mentally and physically to do two jobs. I was just getting really, really worn out.
Yeah.
um but it's like when you create the necessity of like, I have to make my rent this month, or I have to pay this mortgage, or whatever it is,
Yeah.
you come up with solutions. Like, it's like you get past those fears of like, oh, I don't want to talk in front of anybody. I'm nervous to do events because I don't want to like talk in front of someone, let's say. You
Yeah.
just start being like, I don't care, I'm going to get out there. So I think
Yeah.
that there's an essential, I think you have to put yourself in a little bit of like a dangerous like position to get up the courage to do some of the
Mhm.
things that you have to do as an entrepreneur. Like, I would just pound the pavement. I went walking through areas within LA where I was like, okay, I know that my customer is in this neighborhood. I'm going to go into the boutiques that they shop into and meet the owners. And if I didn't have to do that, like if I didn't need to make more sales,
Mhm.
then I probably would have just been like, well, I'm fine at this point, like, or
Right.
I won't go and meet them,
Right. It's a
so,
nice little
or
side
like,
hustle, like whatever.
yeah, if you get too comfortable, you're never gonna get to, I feel like you won't actually make yourself get to the next step. Like doing events out of state
Mhm.
is like kind of daunting, like, oh my God, the logistics of getting everything there. And like once, and then I have to stay in a hotel, et cetera, et cetera. So, but if I have to make sales and I'm in a position where I don't have something to fall back on, then I was like, all right, I'm going to try anything and everything, and that's how you learn.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you're too comfortable, I don't think that you expand and grow as a business owner. And I don't think your business can expand.
Yeah. I love that. I love hearing those stories because, like I said, there's so much advice out there, like to do it in this very like smart, methodical, saved up way. But every entrepreneur I've actually talked to about it and asked that question, they're like, no, I didn't do that. Because I think it does stop you and you would keep it as a side hustle and you don't have as much time or energy to focus on the business.
Yeah.
And you won't take those like kind of
Mhm.
like risky, uncomfortable situations. Like like you said, you wouldn't go pounding the pavement, you wouldn't go door to door selling your jewelry
Yeah,
if you had a full-time job. I mean,
totally.
it just wouldn't even
Totally.
be, where would you even find the time? So I love hearing that.
Right.
Did you have to learn
Thanks. Yeah.
any like skills up front that like, how am I trying to phrase the question? So like, I think that transition from working from somebody else to working for yourself is a big
Yeah.
leap. There's so much to learn. What have been some of the biggest things along the way that you're like, man, that was like, because for me it was finances, like learning how to budget for a business and keep that separate from my personal
Right.
finances. That one was huge for me. Did you have any like big learning things along the way?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like certain things, like having an accountant, specialized
Mm.
services that I'm not a specialist in were essential to me being able to just like be a business owner and be a creative. But I did have a really big learning experience, and this is specifically with contractors versus employees. And this
Oh.
really does differ from state to state because every state has a different just like set of rules on this stuff.
Mhm.
But in the beginning, I actually, or near, like, kind not in the very beginning, but like within my period of going out on my own in jewelry, there was someone that approached me and they were like, hey, I have a business. I do basically consulting to help you become more profitable and like strategize in your business. And I was like, oh, that sounds cool. Like, I'd love to have your skills.
Yeah.
And they were occasionally coming to my home office to do some work, but on their own, like it was their own origination as far as like they wanted to come in. You know what I mean? I
Hmm.
wasn't saying like, oh, you have to be there. And per the laws back then, I was like, oh yeah, they said they're their own business. They do this service for other people. They're not coming based on me telling them that I have to come here. So they're not an employee, they're a
Okay.
contractor.
Yeah.
And basically that person had other clients and got let go of one of their bigger clients. So they lost that income and they applied for basically like what is the word, they applied for unemployment.
Oh,
So
okay.
within the and this is very technical, but I just think it's kind of like a wise tale for other entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And so essentially they put on their unemployment paperwork that they had worked for me, and then that triggered the unemployment people or workers to call me and say like, hey, this person worked for you, when did they work for you, what were they doing, da 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 da. And I was like, I just like had no idea what the employment development department was. I think that's what their name is, EDD. I didn't know why they were calling me, and I just was like, whatever, I'll just answer their questions. And basically there's a gray area in California of like, I mean, now I know you have to have, basically I didn't have her do paperwork in the beginning of starting with me
Hmm.
saying like, this is my company, like registration number, this is, I didn't have her verify that she was indeed her own corporation, her own business doing this service for others.
Okay.
And they ruled against me. They were like, hey, she should have been an employee based on what she was doing for you. And I was like, what? This
What?
is insane. Like, I know. I was absolutely shocked. I was like, I can't believe that this is happening. So I had to pay basically like back taxes for her payroll, to the state of California. And I had to hire a lawyer to like represent me because I was like, this seems crazy, and I didn't know what they were going to rule in the end. And, anyways, it was a lot of headache. It cost me money. And I basically learned my lesson that, like, at that point, I was like, I'm hiring an accountant that
Hmm.
handles getting the paperwork from people, anyone that I work with, because in verifying, like, yep, they are a 1099 or they are an employee, because I just did an assumption that, yeah, she said she's a
Yeah.
contractor, so I'm fine. And then just a huge learning curve for me. So things like that,
Wow.
it's like, yeah, and it can be expensive to hire an accountant, but it's like that's the type of thing, or like a tax attorney, like someone that really knows what you're doing, or like in regards to those business laws per the state. I would definitely invest in that. And then, like, for example, don't hire a cleaner. You know what I mean? Like, really look at what is technical that you don't have the skill of, and
Hmm.
hire on that job or service. And then you do the cleaning, you do the repair of whatever it is, like save money in different ways, because it can really come back to bite you. And then as you learn, you could maybe take over that hat or that job, if you become an expert in it as you evolve as a business. But yeah, there's things like that that I've had to learn the hard way, which is like, whoa, but it is what it
That
is. And
must
I
have
think it's
been
easy for
so
people.
stressful.
Yeah, it was so stressful. Oh my gosh. I was just also in shock, and like I think that's one of those points where someone could be like, "You know what? I'm going to close my business. This is too stressful for me. I can't take the responsibilities of owning a business." But I think persistence is a huge part of being an entrepreneur, and failure is like, I had to tell myself over and over again, and my parents helped me too. They were like, you didn't go to jewelry school or business school. Like, you're learning as you go here. So, like, yeah, you had to pay out some money, etc. But like, you didn't have to pay for a college degree. Like, you're just going to the school of hard knocks at this point. And I think realizing that kind of stuff could happen is just like, you kind of have to embrace it and be willing to experience, like, yeah, I'm going to fail on certain things, and it's a learning point and
Yeah,
not like a give up point, because
absolutely.
being an entrepreneur is all about persisting, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree. I can't remember what his name was or what business it was, but a while ago, I went to a gala at my university, and it was like a fundraising gala or something, and they had this big donor, super rich guy talking at the gala. He was like 90 years old, and they asked him that question. They said something to the effect of like, what do you contribute your success to in business? And that was what he said. He said, I
Hmm.
just never quit. That was it.
Hmm.
He didn't quit. And he was like,
Yeah.
if you quit, you fail. But if you keep with it, you will succeed. Like that. And for
Yeah.
me, that was just such a simple but like kind of profound moment, because I was like, oh yeah, like you just keep going and you will be successful.
Yeah. And I think the one caveat to that is that, like, you should definitely learn from your failures. Like, don't repeat the same mistake again and again. Like, see, okay, what happened here? How did that go wrong or whatever? And then it's like, okay, now moving forward, I'm not going to do that thing. Or, you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to
Yeah.
make sure, like, another thing is have everything in writing. Like,
Mhm.
if you're going to go into, let's say, like an agreement with somebody that like they're going to be a salesperson, always have it in writing. Like, and also protect yourself too, like, not just what is their commission going to be, but it's like, hey, with I can give you 2 weeks notice if I don't feel like this relationship works anymore. And a great thing that is now available is chat gbt, or any type of like AI service. I think llama is the Google one. Like,
Mhm.
utilize that tool of like, hey, how should I make a sales contract with somebody if I'm in this industry? Or like, what kind of production, or like statistically, as far as like, how much should my product cost me in order, like, what are the actual material costs, or you can say, this is my material cost, like, and then I have these other expenses. Can you help me figure out how much I should retail it for? Like, utilize AI, in this day and age, because
Absolutely.
that's something we didn't have back then. And I would say contractual agreements with people of, like, when we would stop working together or whatever, was kind of, it was like daunting, but if in the beginning, but if you have it in writing that, like, hey, if this doesn't work out for either party, like, we're going to just go on in our separate ways. It's like nobody's feelings get hurt at that point, or at least it kind of like lessens the blow.
Right, because you already have it agreed upon. That sounds like something maybe from personal experience that you had, like learning to put everything in writing.
Yeah.
I mean, the one with the employment, absolutely. But
Yep.
did you have any other experiences like that where you were like, okay, like this was a big lesson learned?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, like, oh, geez, I'm trying to think of other things that occurred that were similar to that. With the person that I do casting work with, I
Mm-hmm.
never had it written down that, like, hey, if the casting comes out incorrectly, I'm not going to pay for that, the bad casting. You're going
Yeah.
to need to redo that and make sure that it's done per my design at your own cost, things
Yeah.
like that. I
Yeah.
have that in writing now, but in the beginning I didn't. So a lot of it,
Sure.
and sometimes people are a little bit like, oh, I don't want to have everything in writing. It makes it too significant, or like it would upset the other person that I don't trust them. And it's like, okay, fine. I guess if you want to do a handshake deal, that's fine. But eventually you should have everything in writing, because it's like, it just protects you and the other person and sets the expectations so that
Absolutely.
then you can, like, really fine tune, because you're going to, like, change and grow and evolve as your business evolves. And that's like, you're going to need to be willing, you're going to have people that are willing to change with you,
Yeah.
So.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, there are times, and I was joking with some other entrepreneur friends that, like, you will get threatened with cease and desist. You will get threatened with lawsuits. You will just, I feel like, as a function of being in business, and the more you can have in writing and the more, you can kind of cover yourself, the better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because scrambling
Absolutely.
on that later is a lot less fun than just being like, no, I have this piece of paper saying everything's fine.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
And so, as far as your business, I mean, you've gone through like a lot of transitions over the last 10 years. I know your like the aesthetic of your line has changed, and then more recently you became a mom. And so, tell us a little bit about those transitions and how you've navigated them.
Yeah, I would say that it's really one of the successful things that I've done is keep statistics. So that those are like key things that I know affect my business, and especially sales.
Mm-hmm.
So I keep a weekly statistic on, like, what were our sales last week, and then what were the sales or money in the bank versus the bills that I paid out. And
Mm,
then also, what kind of marketing actions have I done that past week? Because anyone in marketing or anyone that's tried to sell a product knows that you don't just tell someone and then they immediately buy. That's very, very, very rare. So
yeah.
you have to repeat your message of, like, hey, this beautiful piece of jewelry, it would look great on your mom for, like, Mother's Day, let's say, or the mama necklace. You probably need them to see that message or variations of that message at least 8 to 10 times, maybe even 20 times, before they actually go to your website and purchase. And especially online, there's so many distractions, like, oh, they were going to press the checkout button and then they got a text or another notification come up. So it's super, super important that even if you don't write it down, I recommend writing it down, but even if you don't, knowing, like, okay, last week I had an interview come out. I put like stories up every single day on Instagram. I did a few TikToks. Like, it's really good to think with that, because you'll see that effect of like people actually taking action to buy probably weeks later, because it's
Mhm.
not an immediate thing. But if you have a week where it's like, oh, let's say you had a month where you were like, oh, I didn't really do much. But then the next month, your sales are good that month, but then the next month they slope down. You could see, oh, I didn't do much marketing the month
Mhm.
before.
Yeah.
So then, okay, now it's actually going to be like affecting my sales later on. And I think that's something people miss a lot. Like they don't realize that the marketing effects actually come through as sales like weeks or months later.
Yeah.
So it's really important, I find, to track those things. And then it's like, if you know you're going to take a big pivot, let's say, like, for example, I moved to Florida. I knew that I was going to want to I wanted to have kids. So I was like, okay, the event thing, also the pandemic, like, it like threw a wrench in my plans to get that all going. I was like, okay, I know I'm going to have to change up how I do things. So I think that's a time where you could be like, okay, let me just like have a little more cushion in the bank, because
Mhm.
you are going to have to try new things and they might not pan out. Like, I think in the beginning, I did like more Facebook ads, for
Mhm.
example. And then it was like sometimes they would do really well. And then sometimes it was like more of an expense than actual, like, good, like it didn't bring as many sales as I spent on the ads, for example. And
Right.
then it's like, I'm trying to think of another example, but like wholesale accounts, for, like, I knew that I would have to really start reaching out to wholesale accounts if I wasn't going to continue doing events, because events were so lucrative and I was making so much
Mhm.
money from them, that if I wasn't going to have that, I'd have to up my online sales, but then also the wholesale side of the business. So, um, yeah, it's like, I think really looking and keeping almost like a diary of like, okay, I tried this, it did really well. Like,
Yeah.
I called my wholesalers and I got orders. Okay, great. Because sometimes when you're like in a frenzy, like, oh my God, our sales are down, you kind of forget like what was I doing that actually helped me in the business? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So if you
Yeah.
just kind of like keep track of those things, it's really, really helpful. I'm actually a part of, it's called an EMA group, Effective Management Association, specifically for artists, and we meet every week. And that, like, those actions of like keeping part of your statistics, or like keeping your statistics weekly, that's part of what we do, is like part of the group. So those things have been really valuable. It's like, it kind of, as an artist, you're like, oh, I don't, sometimes you can be like, I don't want to do that stuff that's like administrative. But even if you have somebody else within your team, let's say, that does it for you, it's really nice to have that, so that you can look back and be like, okay, why were we doing so well? And some of it's seasonal. Like, we do really well during Mother's Day and we do really well during Valentine's Day. So it's like kind of thinking with that also. But like when you have lulls, you need to like promote even more and market even more.
Mhm.
So, um, I'd say that's how I navigate changes. And like for example, as a mom, like, wow, I have like such little time now to do the business. And because I personally didn't want to have a full-time nanny or anything like that, because I wanted to be with her mainly. And so I knew, okay, my efforts when I'm like working have to go towards marketing and promotion, because
Mhm.
if I don't, and I just focus on like administrative stuff solely, like doing blog posts, I mean, all that stuff is
Yeah.
good, or like, you know like looking at my sales constantly or something like that, um I would not have the sales come through. So I had to make sure that, like, especially now, it's like every day when I start work, I'm doing some sort of marketing and promotion action.
Yeah.
So it's a constant juggle. I'm not going to say it's like, oh, I have it all figured out, but really paying attention to what you're doing and what's been successful is going to help you. Like, you don't need to reinvent the wheel to be successful. You know what I mean? Like, learn from your mistakes, keep doing the thing that works, and then try new things as you continue doing what worked.
Katie, I love what you're talking about because I think it's so important and so insightful that like you have this like creative, beautiful business, but behind the scenes, I mean, you are doing like, I mean, you're keeping spreadsheets and you're keeping track of what you're doing. And like, it's just so important. And I think it's that piece that isn't as exciting, but having you as an entrepreneur, even if you are considering yourself like a creative person, you do have to have that like business mindset. You have to have that like dedication to the business, not just the creating.
Yeah, and I think for some people they're like, "Oh, I can't even focus on that every day." And I agree. Like I set aside maybe 1 hour out of the week to do some of those like more administrative things
Yeah.
because it's not something that I want to do every day, you know? So I think compartmentalizing your work and the time that you have, like, okay, this hour I'm going to focus on this. That's
Mm-hmm.
all I'm going to do for that week. And setting a timer on your phone or whatever, I find that helps me to actually just like get done with those things that I don't really enjoy doing because it's
Yeah.
like, okay, this is all the time I have for it. And then the other things like doing social media every day or whatever, you can even batch work that. That's another word for it that people use, like just focusing on one thing for one day and you do it for like the entire month.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff can really help you keep your production high, but like within a limited time frame. And I found I'm constantly exercising that ability myself. I'm not an expert on it because I can get distracted so easily, but utilize like the do not disturb on your phone to like turn off text messages so that like you can zone in and get like 4 hours of work done in 30 minutes. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah,
Drink coffee or whatever you like
mini
and
game.
just get it done.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I have
Yeah, but
one
it's a
last.
juggling act, that's for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, absolutely. You have to wear so many hats when you're an entrepreneur and doing it all yourself. So I have one last question and then we'll wrap it up. But what's maybe either, okay, I'll give you the option.
Yeah.
What's either something that you would like just love to share with people, or what's something like looking back that you would wish you had known when starting your business?
Hmm. I mean, oh, that's a good question. I guess I'll go with the low hanging fruit. I would say
Okay.
something I want to share with everybody
Yeah,
is
perfect.
that you should, if you're a solo entrepreneur, sometimes it can be hard to like self start, let's say, or stay inspired, especially as a creative when you are wearing so many different hats. So I would find something that inspires you. Like I love the How I Built This podcast. I listen to that every week because it's stories of triumph. Like you
Oh,
hear all these people and like the challenges that they overcame and became like huge companies. So I think that that's really important. Like find something that inspires you and fuels your fire. On a weekly basis, and maybe that's a walk or maybe it's a workout class or meeting up with your friends to just like kind of like decompress. So whatever that thing is for you, I think that's really important. And that always helps me to like feel like, okay, let me take a deep breath and like here we go again, because you're the one as a solo business owner. Like I feel like this happens with so many artists and creatives. Like you have to then create the new piece or the new project or the new marketing campaign, and it's like it's a lot of brain power. So it's like important to make sure that you're fulfilling like things, doing things that inspire you, I would say.
I love that advice. Thank you. That's great. And I've got to look up that
Yeah.
podcast now. Well,
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
thank you so much,
it's
Katie,
a
for
good one.
taking the time out. Yeah, yeah, I'll check it out. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to chat with us and share about your story and your business. And if people want to find you online and buy some of your beautiful jewelry, where can they follow you and find you and shop from you?
I would love for everybody to follow us and shop with us. You can shop on katiedeanjewelry.com, and our Instagram is at katiedeanjewelry. Our TikTok, I believe, is also at Katie Dean Jewelry. And then like on Pinterest, we have at K Dean Jewelry. So you can go and find all of those. We're on Facebook too. So whichever one, you enjoy being on, we would love to have you follow along with us and be a part of the conversation.
Perfect. I'll link all of those in the show notes so people can go ahead and take a peek at those. And I just wanted to again say thank you so much. And for those of you listening or watching, if you enjoyed this episode of Unaesthetically Speaking, be sure to subscribe because I have so many more incredible entrepreneurs that I'm interviewing and chatting with. And I would love to have you following along. So thank you, Katie, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me.